I think I may have said in my last video that I would never vlog again. I think that because I think I got a comment to that effect, but I'm vlogging again. I think maybe what I meant was that I wasn't going to make the videos that were called like stupid vlogging number whatever anymore. One reason is that I think I was kind of making them to kind of journal during the pandemic. Second, and not that the pandemic is over, but I just don't really want to do pandemic journaling anymore. The second one is that, like, it's kind of hard to tell what the videos are about if you're trying to watch them. The third one is when I'm posting them, it's annoying to have to remember what number they are, so those are all my reasons. Anyways, I wrote in my diary yesterday, which was Sunday, that I had to write down or document everything that happened to me on Saturday so I like never again forget how dumb I am. So that's what I'm doing. I don't know, something that's always kind of like been difficult for me to get over, I think partly because it's a little hard for other people to get, is like this thing where if you are autistic or really if you have cognitive disabilities that affect kind of like sort of nebulous things that are like a little bit hard to pin down, like problems with like your memory or thinking or planning and stuff like that, stuff that sounds kind of abstract. It's frustrating because like in any individual moment of your life you seem like normal and like you don't have a disability, perhaps, and like it's kind of this thing where it's like if someone saw you in motion they would like know that something was wrong, but if someone just saw you as a still image they wouldn't think that there was anything wrong. And there's this kind of thing where I think like when you're sort of assessing someone, it's like you always kind of see them like in just a moment of their life, so it's hard to really get like the way that things really are. And I also think part of my thing is like, I may have trouble doing a specific thing, but like a lot of typical people, may like forget something or like make some kind of mistake or not understand something at some point. So it's like everything that happens to me like can also sound kind of like relatable, and so that's also like frustrating. I mean, I think on a certain level this doesn't really matter. There was like a really long period of my life when I really struggled and like was kind of very depressed about the idea that, most people that I met wouldn't believe that I had a disability and would always perceive me as being quote unquote smart, which I just really found kind of devastating on a certain level. Like, it felt really upsetting to kind of feel like so like not seen by like everybody that I interacted with. And I feel like the only reason that I've kind of gotten over this is just because people are so shitty in some ways that I think I've sort of come to realize there's no way to really, you can't like possibly try to define your happiness by how other people view you and like by whether other people see you as you really are, because they probably just won't. But I think there's still a level on which like this kind of gets to me, even just like in my own perception of myself. Like, I think I do kind of constantly sort of like assess myself from moment to moment, and it's like, okay, I seem normal, like then how come I can't do this? So I thought just like I would just summarize my adventures on Saturday, especially because like at a certain point like they did get kind of dreamlike like late in the evening. So I have this thing where for I guess like the first several years of my adult life, I had a really hard time figuring out when to do like certain tasks that I needed to do. So like paying my rent, or I'm self-employed, so like when I would do my invoices, my hours, or I don't know, just kind of things like checking on my bank account and like making sure that I got paid when I was supposed to and that I paid all my bills and stuff like that. I always found like it wasn't that I necessarily couldn't do these things if I sat down to do them, but I always kind of found it confusing to understand like how people know like when to set aside the time to do those things. So I guess for probably the past like 5 years, like once a week, usually on Saturday, I will kind of like go to a cafe and I'll take like 3 hours, and I have kind of a list of like the like usual things that like I usually would need to either do, or at least like try to remember whether I have to do them or not. So I will like go through my list. Like I had a hard time during the pandemic because I think like the sort of stimulus of like going to a cafe or something and like being around people made it a lot easier to focus on my list, and I kind of found it hard to even finish it when I was trying to do it at home. So anyway, that's what I usually do every Saturday. So I woke up on Saturday, but my thing is I just kind of feel shitty a lot, I have trouble sleeping a lot, and have trouble waking up. So basically every day I like plan out my day like in a really detailed way, but I usually get up like several hours later than I planned every day. I don't know why I keep planning to be able to get up early, because I like can't. So anyway, I woke up, I just laid in bed with a headache, feeling bad, etc. And like 2 hours after I was planning to get up, I finally got up and started getting ready for the day and went to the cafe and started getting stuff done. The thing was, I also had run out of my SodaStream canister and had to go to the hardware store to replace it, and like it wasn't something that I could like put off any longer because I'm like a very picky drinker. Like I can't really drink uncarbonated water, and I like literally didn't have any anymore. So I definitely had to do that, and then I was gonna go to the movies with my friend. So you know, I planned my day very carefully, and planning backwards, I was like, okay, I can't spend the same amount of time at the cafe that I usually would. I'm gonna just like kind of focus on the essential things that I like absolutely have to do, and I'll just get those things done, and I'll, you know, I think I figured out that like by 2, I definitely had to leave, go to the hardware store and get my new canister, and then go home, and then go to the movies. So I went to the hardware store and I got there pretty quickly, but one thing that I find difficult about living in San Francisco, probably the most difficult thing, is that the buses and trains don't really have like a timetable. Like, you know, prior to moving here, I lived in Cincinnati, which has like probably not very good public transit in terms of like how to actually get places. Like, I remember this one time when I had to go get some kind of like medical checkup for my job, and I was sent to like a specific place, and I remember it took me like hours to get there, and I had to like walk across a highway in like a freezing wind and like all this stuff because it just wasn't really covered by transit. But what I did find nice is that they have a schedule, and you like actually know when the train or bus is going to come. And I think something that I found tough in San Francisco is that like not only are the trains and buses like late and delayed a lot, which they are, but there's also just like, even if they are on time, they don't come at a certain time. They're supposed to come like every like 20 minutes or every 10 minutes or every 15 minutes. So I invariably find it really hard to make judgments about like how long it will take to do things, because you don't know you don't know how much time you should allow for waiting for the bus, I guess. So my sort of best practice that I adopted a few years ago is to kind of sit down and like plot it out and like estimate that like everything will take like the longest possible amount of time to arrive. But sometimes I find it kind of hard to stick to that because it is really annoying to have to like leave super early and like usually get places super early because you're doing that. And unfortunately, I think like when I make like my kind of snap decisions, I tend to kind of assume that, okay, if it's supposed to come like every 20 minutes, then like I guess it's pretty likely it'll come in 10 minutes. You know, there's like a 50% chance of that. Is that true? I don't understand math. But so just kind of like not taking into account that like it could be like much longer is something that I tend to struggle with. So anyway, right, I went and got my SodaStream, and it was time for me to go home. And so I went to catch the bus, and also just my phone had just died, so I couldn't really look up stuff on the bus. I couldn't look up the times. So I had to like kind of walk for a while because there's only like certain bus stops that have like the electronic display that will tell you when the bus is coming. So it took me a while to do that, and like for me, kind of like, I don't know if you can see it anymore, I was kind of writing myself notes on my hand, which is something I used to do when I was younger, but now I usually would use my phone if it was not dead. But I guess like something that I usually do is like just sort of keep this constant running schedule of like what I'm doing, like where I am, how long I expect it to take, and like, you know, all the other things I am going to do in the day and like how long I expect them each to take. And I'm kind of like constantly updating that whenever I'm doing anything. I often have this like sense of embarrassment that like someone's going to look over my shoulder and see it and realize I'm like extremely stupid. But anyway, I wasn't able to do that because my phone was dead. I wasn't able to kind of like set some timers, which is something I do a lot to like keep track of what I'm doing. I wasn't able to do that because my phone was dead, and I wasn't able to like entertain myself with like a podcast or something. So anyway, once I walked to the bus stop and I was like trying to wait for the bus to get home, I saw that it wasn't coming for like 20 minutes, which was actually longer than it's supposed to take, but fuck the San Francisco Municipal Transport Authority. It doesn't really do what it says it's going to do. So kind of like not really wanting to wait, I just sort of like started walking towards my home, even though I couldn't really get very far because I was like still fairly far away from my home. And as I was walking, I often have this problem where because I'm like always late and always kind of crunched for time, I find myself trying to think of like ways that I could like make like more use of my time or something. So I ended up being like, well, since I'm kind of close to an ATM for my bank, which has like not very many surcharge free ATMs in the city, I should probably like walk to that ATM and like make a withdrawal while I'm close to it. So I impulsively did that, but because I didn't have my phone, I couldn't really look up like exactly where the ATM was, so it was like several blocks further away than I thought that it was. And so I ended up realizing there like wasn't that much point walking back to the bus stop, and I should just walk to a different bus stop that was closer and go home from there, which is what I did. But then by the time that I got home, I needed to leave at like 3:30 to get to the movie, and it was already 3:45, I think, and I needed to charge my phone because it was dead, and I wanted to charge my phone charger so that I could hopefully like continue to charge my phone when I went out. So I think I took like 15 minutes to like sit at home, drink water, try to calm down, because I was honestly a little bit upset that I was already like super late, and just like, I don't know, the whole process of trying to get home had been kind of like, I don't know, sometimes like I just feel extremely stuck and like frustrated that I can't seem to like handle situations that I find myself in. So I took a little bit of time to try to relax, and then I was kind of going out the door. Then I realized the bus was coming like right then, so I like ran out the door, and like the bus driver very kindly picked me up as I like ran after the bus, like waving, which was very nice. So as soon as I got on the bus, I texted my friend to let him know that I wouldn't be able to get to the movie on time, and asking, since he had bought the tickets, if he could like leave my ticket for me or something like that. Then I go to plug in my phone to my portable charger, but it turns out that because I was upset and stressed, I didn't bring the charger with like anything that could plug into a phone. I've only brought the cord that plugs it into the wall. So my phone is only at like 15%. So I was unhappy, and I think I kind of foresaw that like the rest of the day was going to go the same way, because I was already feeling kind of dumb and not making the best decisions, and I was probably going to not have a working phone again pretty soon. So I headed to the movie, and it took me even longer to get there than I thought. So I was like, I think, when did I arrive? So the movie started at 4:30. I'm pretty sure I got there at 5:30, so given that there's like usually a lot of trailers for movies, I probably didn't miss like a full hour of it, but I was very confused by the movie. I also had done this thing where I asked my friend to get those like raised seats at the back of the theater because I think they're cool, but they were too cool for me. Like when I went into the theater and tried to like quietly sneak in, which unfortunately like I know this has like already happened with me and the same friend like multiple times. I was trying to quietly sneak in, and like my seat number was supposed to be on my ticket, but I couldn't actually read any of the numbers or letters because it was so dark in the theater. And like when I went up the stairs to like the elevated area, it was like behind this kind of bar, and so it was like extremely dark and like I couldn't see anything. So I like literally sat down on the floor, like took out my phone and was trying to like read the letters and numbers on the floor with my phone. Finally, I heard my friend like softly whispering to me, and I like crawled toward his voice, and then like he was sitting on the outside, and as I tried to get into the inside seat, like it was so dark that I like couldn't see anything. My friend had to like hold my hand and like guide me into my seat, so I really suffered, and I was very bored by the movie because I didn't have a connection to the characters, because I missed the part of the movie where you form your connection to the characters, I think. So then I had fun. I went out to eat with my friend, and we got on the bus together. He lived like pretty close to the theater, so he was like getting off pretty soon. But we were having a nice talk. We were having fun. Unfortunately, my phone had already died again when I was trying to calculate the tip at the restaurant. And so I didn't have my phone, but it was totally fine because I knew where I was planning to connect to another bus to go home. So I was sitting and reading on the bus, having a positive experience, and then I was paying attention to when it was time to get off the bus, and I got off. At this point, it was like, I guess like 8:30 at night, and it just so happens like the place where these two buses connect is in kind of a rough neighborhood. I don't really like calling places a rough neighborhood, especially because I guess in my life I felt a lot of places that I told are like dangerous like actually seem pretty normal, and like people are pretty nice there. But I guess it's like an area where there's a lot of people who act kind of like in erratic and unexpected ways. So I didn't super want to stand around there, and another thing that was going on was that it just so happened to be an area where like none of the bus stops, like most of the bus stops like weren't even visible. Like they didn't have like a pole painted or anything. It's like you just had to like know, which without a phone like you can't even look it up, so you don't know where to wait for the bus. And so I wasn't too happy about that, and I also didn't really feel comfortable talking to anyone just because of the vibe right where I was. So I decided to kind of walk just a little bit south, like, sorry, you probably don't live in San Francisco, so I can't describe exactly what I'm talking about, but basically just like along the bus line in the direction that I was going to be going in. I decided to keep walking a little bit until I could find like a more easy to identify bus stop, so I could be sure that I was actually waiting at the bus stop, and hopefully one that had like an LED display of when the bus was coming, so I could like have an idea of that. Because I don't know, part of the thing is like if there like isn't going to be a bus coming, which is sometimes true, like I would rather like know so I can go to a different bus stop. And I think that's something that always like really stresses me, like, oh no, is there like a smarter way that I should be trying to deal with this? Like I think the idea of just like, you know, this is the whole thing, I think the idea of like sitting somewhere and like waiting and waiting and waiting and trying to do something a certain way, but having that actually be like the wrong way to do it, like if you're like waiting and waiting for a bus but like the bus isn't actually coming, that just like really frustrates me. So I think I'm always trying to figure out like an alternative way to do things, but I think because I'm not very good at thinking or planning, especially when I'm stressed, I think I often like kind of shoot myself in the foot and cause myself more problems by doing that. Yeah, so anyway, I'm walking along the bus stop. By the way, the bus that I was waiting for is called the 19 bus, and I walked so far that I kind of got to like where there was a lot of other bus stops, and when I got there I saw the 9 bus, which is like another bus that goes to where I live, and so that bus was like coming right then, which I felt very lucky about, and I just got right on that bus instead. So I was sitting on the bus, happily reading my book. I'm reading The Land of Laughs by Jonathan Carroll. I think every like 5 or 10 years I read one of his books. I really like them. I don't know, I guess they have some like obvious weird aspects that I could criticize, but I just find them to be like, the ones I've read have just been like some of the most enjoyable books I've ever read. I guess like maybe I could sort of jump harder into his catalog, but I also think there's kind of something nice about like slowly reading a writer throughout your life, like knowing that you're always going to enjoy them and like not just like reading all their books at once. Anyway, I was really enjoying the book, and I was also kind of thinking that when I got home I would actually have time to take a shower, which I didn't think I was going to have. So I was feeling pretty good about that, and as I was reading my book I was kind of like slightly paying attention to all the bus stops, but I was like forgetting that I wasn't on the 9 bus and thinking that I was on the 19 bus. And so since I have like a vague idea of where the 19 bus goes, I kind of knew like at what point I would need to perk up because I was almost home. And I wasn't really recognizing the names of the stops, so I was like, oh, this isn't, I just like must not be anywhere near home. So suddenly I did perk up because I recognized a name, and I suddenly realized that I was actually on the 9 bus and I had already gone past where I live. And I'm like not afraid or too lazy to just like walk a long distance to get home, but it was just this kind of thing where I feel like I've never walked this particular area, and I think there might be like a highway in the middle of it or something. I tend to get very confused by geography if I'm not like very familiar with a place. And I do like walk around the city a lot. There's a lot of places I'm extremely familiar with that really confused me when I first moved here, but in this certain case, like I just couldn't really figure out how to get from where I had gotten off the bus back to my house. I was definitely gonna have to wait for the bus going back in the other direction. So, and I am very familiar with this bus stop. I happen to go to this place a lot, that's why I recognized it, but so I went back to the bus to go wait to go back in the other direction, and it was like really cold. I was only wearing a hoodie because I wasn't expecting to like be standing out here in a totally different neighborhood, which is much colder than where I live, where I wasn't expecting to be, and waiting for the bus. And of course the electronic thing at the bus stop wasn't working, so I couldn't tell when the bus was going to come. And the other person there was this man who was listening to a boombox, which I always like when I see because you don't really see that so much anymore. And at a certain point he said something to me like, oh, the bus is coming in about 6 minutes. He must have checked his phone. But it was all a lie. I think the bus had just been like frustrating this man for like a really long time, because I would occasionally hear him like complaining about this on the phone to a friend. And I guess it was only like 9 o'clock, so it wasn't really that late, but somehow I think because it is kind of like an area where like it's not really a residential area, it's not quite a highway, but it's just kind of an area where like people don't really like live or hang out. So like, I don't know, just at this time of night, and there's no really like bars or restaurants right here, so at this time of night there's just like really big box stores that were all closed. So at this time of night nobody was really there except for like me and these like 2 men that were waiting for the bus on this like very long big sidewalk. And one of the men was the guy who was listening to his boombox, and then the other guy was like standing really far away on the other side. And it was just really, really cold, and I was reading my book, and things began to feel really surreal, because instead of like the 15 or 20 minutes that I thought were going to pass, instead, like, if I remember right, it was like 45 minutes passed. So it was kind of a long time to be standing there in the dark, like not knowing when the bus was going to come. And then I think what really brought it up to another level, like, was the music. Like, I'm not like that knowledgeable about music. I mean, in terms of like genres or like being familiar with like lots of different musicians or songs. So I apologize if I'm like making fun of some standards, but to me, the music that this guy listened to was extremely weird. It was like R&B songs that were all about men being like hard done by women, and the men were sort of like reasserting their like awesomeness. There's this one song that started with like a really long skit between what I thought was a man and what I thought was like a sexy woman with like a masculine voice, but I think it was actually a woman who was playing like a little boy character, and it was all about this man's son telling him that his wife was cheating on him, and then like the son goes on a long rant about how like the wife is like such a bad person and she should like appreciate how great the father is, and then like kind of goes into this song of like the father character, I guess, singing about how he isn't worried about finding a new partner because he's so great. And so there was just like a series of songs like this, like playing on for 45 minutes on the boombox, and they all had this type of vibe where I was like, I don't know, I just like, there was none of the like kind of like rawness or vulnerability that you hope to hear in a song, because every song was just a guy being like, oh, I'm wonderful. So then, as I was standing there, I started to hear this other music, and it really weirded me out because I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Like, first I thought it was like in a nearby car, but you know, obviously cars continued to drive by and like the music never went away. And it was just this like slow, spooky organ music. And like, again, this area just has like big box stores, so there was like no church, there was like nowhere that this music could have been coming from. And I eventually realized, I think, that it was coming from the other guy who was at the bus stop, and that the reason he had gone as far away as possible was because he wanted to listen to his own music, and like his preferred genre of music was kind of like diametrically opposed to what the first guy was listening to. So he was listening to like organs and bagpipes, just this kind of like spooky sounding instrumental music. And you know, at one point, I don't know if you've seen this, but like sometimes when people are waiting for the bus and they're like really frustrated, people will do this thing where they like walk out in the middle of the street, which is kind of stupid on like a really high traffic road like this, but sometimes you just are really desperate and you just do something bad because you're desperate. So all three of us were like very occasionally just like walking out into the middle of the street, like looking like as far as we could just to kind of like imagine if we could see the bus. And so at one point I did this, and like in the process I got kind of close to the guy who was playing the bagpipe music and stuff. And so I kind of went through a little thought process where I was like, do I want to continue to stand closer to this guy? Because I've been leaning on the bus shelter to read my book, and when I'm leaning there, I can hear like the sort of like male positivity R&B music like very loud, because that's where that guy is. If I stay over by this guy, I'll be able to hear like this totally different genre of music. Like, would that be a better experience? And so I ended up deciding to just like stand like exactly in the middle of the sidewalk, so I would be like equally close, and I was kind of experiencing like this mashup of the two genres of music. And this is when like it started to feel like just this really dreamlike experience. I think using my phone to like, first of all, like listen to podcasts and stuff to sort of keep my attention when I do stuff, but also like always running timers to like sort of keep myself paying attention to how long things are taking, and always like writing my little schedule of like what I'm doing and like how long things are going to take and like how late or early I am. As if I remember early. I joke. But like doing that kind of keeps me like anchored in time and reality a little bit more. So I think like not having my phone and just like being there in the dark, listening to these two genres of music playing in the cold, and like kind of having the sense that like maybe the bus would just never ever come, was really like I found myself thinking like, this is annoying, but this is a moment that I should appreciate. Like, I think this is something I'm going to remember for years to come. So that's why I'm talking about it. Anyway, I finally went home, and I got home late. It was very sad because I had more plans that I was late for, but that's what happened. Another thing I forgot to mention is that when I was on a different bus earlier, there was yet another weird genre of music. This guy was listening to a really detailed rap song that was about conspiracy theories, including Jesus having kids with Mary Magdalene, but like just a very broad array of conspiracy theories were being like very quickly brought up in the song. And I was only on the bus at the same time as this guy for a little while, which was kind of disappointing to me because I wanted to hear the other conspiracy theories that were going to happen.